Good. Places, everyone, places. Sound check, please. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Lights. Do we have lights? Right. And action. 1 second, please. What's going on? Where are my actors? The wise men have COVID? The angels are self-isolating? What about Herod? He's stuck in the UK, no flights. Please tell me we at least have the prophets. Oh dear. Look, I'm terribly sorry about this, folks, but we're going to have to cancel our Christmas pageant. It looks like we simply don't have any actors. Well, unless, would you mind helping me out? Don't worry, it'll be really easy, and I'll talk you through your parts. So I'm going to divide you into sort of 4 sections here. In this section kind of here, you guys are our kings. Right. At the back there, you sort of from Lee maybe back, you guys can be our wise men. In the front here, we can have our prophets. And we've got some beautiful people at the back that can be our angels. Now, you're going to need to know an action for when your part comes up. Kings, it's really easy. It's just a crown on your head. There we go. Crown on your head. Wise men, you stroke your imaginary beards. Yeah, there you go. Prophets, or you might have a real beard. You can scratch your real beard like Lee. Prophets, you guys are going to shout. So put your hands to your mouth and shout. Okay, great. And angels, you appear in dreams. So that's your hands to your head as if you're sleeping. Right. Don't fall asleep for real. Okay, we're going to test that out. We're going to practice it quickly. Right, kings. Great. Wise men, prophets, and angels. Excellent. You can see that you guys are going to be perfect for your parts. But before we get to the pageant, I should probably tell you a little bit about your roles. I can tell that some of you are method actors, and so you're going to really need to know some background to get into character. And so we begin with the kings. Great. Well, you might have noticed that there are actually 2 kings in this story. Well, the first is Herod, and Herod was the ruler of the Roman province of Judea. He was known as Herod the Great, but this was as a result of his numerous building projects, and certainly not his character. He was a nasty piece of work, a megalomaniac, suspicious of everyone. He had his wife executed, as well as 3 of his children. He wouldn't tolerate any challenge to his rule. And the Roman Senate had given Herod a title, King of the Jews. And so when some wise men come knocking, asking where the King of the Jews is to be born, well, you can see why Herod responds as he does. He refuses to have anybody threaten his claim to the throne, even if that means murdering a few small children. Well, Barbados recently ditched Her Majesty as head of state to become the world's newest republic. There was no violence or bloodshed. They even invited Prince Charles as their guest of honor. But back in the day, you couldn't get rid of a king so easily. Herod had the backing of the Roman Empire. And so the Jews were stuck with him, whether they wanted him or not, and most did not. Well, Herod epitomizes for us everything that is wrong with the kings of our world. Power-hungry, cunning, ruthless, corrupt, self-centered, and willing to lie to get their way. Well, that's what he does with the wise men. He doesn't want to go and worship this other king. No, he wants to kill him, to get rid of this challenge to his authority and power. But who is this other king that has Herod in such a flap? Well, it is, of course, Jesus, known as the Christ. Now, Christ isn't his surname. If you addressed a letter to J. Christ, Bethlehem, well, the postman would be confused, because Christ isn't a name, it's a title, like doctor or reverend or sir. We've been learning some Greek words this year, beta, delta, gamma, and now omicron. Well, Christ is the Greek equivalent of the Hebrew word Messiah, both of which mean anointed one. And who do you anoint? A king. And so to call Jesus Christ is to call him king. Now, Jesus isn't a Netflix king. What do I mean by that? Well, Netflix are pros at advertising. They make amazing posters for movies that you think are going to be the best movie in the world. But then when you watch it, well, you're disappointed. The movie hasn't lived up to its hype. The acting is poor, the CGI is terrible, and the movie is full of cliches and corny dialogue. The plot is non-existent, but your high hopes are dashed on the rocks of mediocrity. Well, not so with Jesus. Jesus will never disappoint you. He'll never let you down. Well, Jesus is a shepherd for his people. He cares for us, he protects us, he feeds us. And if we go wandering off, well, he seeks us out. Well, Jesus is the perfect king, the Christ. Which is why the wise men are looking for him. And so they ask Herod, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? And so this would be a good time to tell you a little bit more about the wise men. Well, in some Bibles, you'll see them called magi, which is what we had this morning, which means that they were probably mathematicians or astrologers or astronomers. They were the ancient equivalent of modern-day scientists. Now, despite the carol, we don't actually know how many there were. It's often assumed that there were 3 because there are 3 gifts, but we actually aren't told their exact number. Nor are we told where they came from. The East is a rather vague description. They might have been from Babylon or from Persia or from some other part of the Middle East. But however many there were and wherever they came from, one thing is certain. Well, they weren't Jewish. Does that strike you as odd? It should. What on earth are these men doing? Traveling hundreds of miles to come and worship a Jewish king. And when they finally meet Jesus, what do? They fall down and worship him. These grown men, wise men, falling at the feet of a young boy, giving him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Who's looking forward to getting gifts this Christmas? Just me. Okay. Tough crowd. Well, if you assume maybe you're just internally, happy. What are you hoping for? Chocolate? Okay. Biltong? Socks? Shower gel? Mercedes-Benz GLE Coupe SUV? That's the gift for kings today. But in ancient times, gold and myrrh and frankincense, that's what you'd give to a king. So why are these wise men treating this foreigner as their king? Doesn't make any sense. Unless Jesus isn't just the king of the Jews, but king of the whole world. Well, the only other time in the Bible that we see the phrase king of the Jews is at Jesus' crucifixion. Pilate places a sign above his head which reads, King of the Jews, in Latin, Aramaic, and Greek, the 3 main languages of the ancient world. Now, whether or not Pilate meant it, what he's saying is that Jesus isn't just king of the Jews, he's king of the whole world. Which means that he's my king. He's king of that atheist at your work. He's king of the homeless person at the robots. He's the king of your friends and your family, and he's your king too. What's the correct response when you meet a king? When Western culture, if you're a man, you ought to bow, just a neck bow, which simply means nodding your head. Women are to do a small curtsy. In Africa, we're much more relational. We simply shake hands, but always let the king make the first move. In the East, a full body bow is appropriate, held for a few seconds. And the more important the person, the lower the bow. Well, the wise men fall down and worship Jesus. They prostrate themselves because that's the appropriate response to the king who is king of the whole world. But not only do they worship Jesus, they also give him gifts, or something that we continue to do this day. Well, Christmas has become all about the presents. One recent survey estimates that South Africans will spend 252 billion rand this festive season. Hopefully your loved ones are in the 77% of respondents who plan to buy gifts for their family. Well, if not, 21% of people also plan on buying themselves a gift. At the top of people's wish list, money, followed by gift vouchers. That's no surprise. Christmas has become a commercial holiday. In fact, a large number of people who celebrate Christmas aren't even Christians. But Christmas isn't about the gifts that we give each other. At its core, Christmas is about Jesus. The whole reason we celebrate Christmas is to remember the gift that was given to humanity when Jesus was born. Well, too often we go through the motions of Christmas without paying attention to this most important gift. It's as if God gave us a gift that we've refused to open. How silly would that be? Do you like to open your presents from smallest to biggest? That's assuming that you get more than one present. Well, imagine opening all of your presents, but then leaving the biggest and the best one unopened. So have you unwrapped the gift that Jesus offers us this Christmas? His name, it gives away what that means. Jesus means God saves, which is why one of his friends wrote these famous words. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Well, if you haven't opened this gift yet, well, why not today? If you'd like to know more, don't leave with questions. Come and chat to me after the service. And for those of us who have opened the gift and accepted Jesus' sacrifice on our behalf, we'll use this Christmas as a reminder and a celebration of what he's done. I read about one family who spent Christmas afternoon baking a cake together. When it's ready, they light a candle and sing happy birthday to Jesus. Might sound silly, but this simple tradition has helped them to remember why it is that they celebrate. Well, that brings us to the third character in our story, the prophets. Great. Well, if you're keen-eyed, you'll notice that prophets appear 4 times in Matthew chapter 2. The prophets confirm that the Messiah is to be born in Bethlehem. A prophet noticed that God's son will be called out of Egypt. The words of the prophet Jeremiah are fulfilled when the children are killed in Bethlehem. And Jesus fulfills prophecy when he returns to live in Nazareth. We won't have time to look at all of those today, but here's the important point. Matthew goes out of his way to show us that all of these events happened according to prophecy. Well, why is that important? Well, we need to know a little bit about what the role of a prophet was. Well, when God wanted to communicate a message to his people, he spoke through the prophets. But the prophets didn't simply predict the future. They weren't ancient fortune tellers. They also proclaimed a message from God. They were both predictors and proclaimers. They spoke of the future, but they also spoke of their own days. And the words that they spoke were recorded on scrolls and put together into what is known as the Old Testament. And so when we read the Old Testament, we see all the things that God promised would come to pass or had come to pass already. Which is why Matthew makes such a big deal of prophecy here. It's like he's bolding the text, underlining it, getting a highlighter and scribbling everywhere, putting giant asterisks all over and NBs and arrows and exclamation marks. 4 times Matthew tells us that all of this was to fulfill prophecy. It was his way of saying, sit up, pay attention. This is really, 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 really important. You know that king that God promised us? The one who the whole Old Testament talks about and points us towards. Well, he's here. It's Jesus. Don't believe me? Well, he was born in Bethlehem. That's where the Messiah was to be born according to prophecy. He fled to Egypt, but God rescued him, just like he promised. Herod tried to kill him. Another fulfillment of prophecy. Mothers weeping for their children. Mary and Joseph returning to Nazareth. That's right. To fulfill another prophecy. Well, Matthew is doing what modern day lawyers do. He's stacking up the evidence, building a rock solid case. He's showing us how God is always faithful to his promises. That when God says something, it will happen. And God continues to speak to us today through the words of both the Old and the New Testament, the Bible. So take time out this Christmas to read the Christmas story with your family and your friends. Anyone have an Advent calendar here? Lee and someone else. Right. Well, you get all sorts of Advent calendars nowadays, don't you? The traditional chocolate one, but you also get Lego and Nespresso and beauty products, Hot Wheels, jewelry, and Marvel superheroes. Well, it's too late for this year, but next year, why not have a Bible Advent calendar? If you've got kids, which I know a lot of you do or are expecting, Well, then give them a Bible verse each morning from the Christmas story. And for yourself, or read one of the gospel accounts, or work through a devotional book, or use a prayer or Bible app. It's a great way to be reminded of what Christmas is all about. Because it's easy to forget. The message of Christmas gets lost in the busyness of life, which is why we need to listen carefully, because God speaks to us despite all the noise and distractions. Which brings us to our fourth and final character, our angels. Well, to modern ears, talk of angels can sound a little bit strange. But the Bible is clear that the supernatural exists, that angels are real, and they're important. Because angels are God's messengers, which is literally what the word angel means, messenger. Or sometimes angels give messages directly, and other times they speak through dreams. Well, actually, in Matthew chapter 2, God uses 3 supernatural means to communicate his message: angels, dreams, and a star. And all of these supernatural beings and events, well, they confirm what the prophet said. And they confirm God's message. How do we know that Jesus wasn't just another Jewish baby boy born in a small town? Well, because of the extraordinary events that surrounded his birth. Well, I was born on Christmas Day in 1976, the first baby born that day at Mowbray Maternity Hospital. The nurses were very excited. My crib was decorated with silver tinsel, but no angel appeared, no special star. No one had any special dreams that week, because my birth was just ordinary. I'm sure it was pretty important to me, but besides a few family members and nurses, well, my birth went by unnoticed by the rest of the world. But when the King of the world is to be born, well, his birth is something special. It's something to be announced with angels and dreams and stars, because his birth was no ordinary birth. His birth was something for the whole world to notice. It was unique and special and out of the ordinary. That's why we put angels or stars on the top of our Christmas trees, because they point us to that very first Christmas when the Savior of the world was born. Well, each Christmas we celebrate the birth of this King, of Jesus come into the world. And he's a king that demands a response. You could respond like Herod, quite happy being king of your own life. You won't tolerate any rivals, and so refuse to follow Jesus. You might even go so far as to actively work against him. Or perhaps you could respond like the chief priests and the scribes. Remember that these are the people who are literally waiting for the Messiah. They know where he's to be born. They're the ones who tell Herod. But what do they do when the wise men arrive? You'd think that they rush off to Bethlehem ASAP to go and see for themselves. But no, they carry on with life as normal. Well, we celebrate Christmas with trees and mince pies and turkey and gammon and stockings and crackers and gingerbread and mistletoe and elves and reindeer and Santa and snowflakes and snowmen, always strange in the southern hemisphere. But we leave out the most important thing. Our King has come. But we don't bother to go and meet him. We're too busy. We're getting on quite well without him, thank you very much. And so we stay away. We ignore him. Well, alternatively, you could respond like the wise men. They rejoice exceedingly with great joy. That is, they were overjoyed. Why? Well, the words of the Christmas carol remind us. Joy to the world. The Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. The arrival of the King is a time of great joy. If Jesus is your King, well, Christmas is a time to remember his coming and to respond with joy and worship. And so that's the message of our Christmas pageant. Jesus is the promised King who's to be worshipped by the world. And so kings, wise men, prophets, and angels, will you help me tell the story? When you hear your character name, remember to do your action. Matthew chapter 2. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw that his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted, because they are no more. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. And he rose and took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he had heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene.